Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're jumping into something that affects so many people. Breast cancer screening. It's changing incredibly fast right now.
It really is. Contentious, definitely transforming. You've got new tech, major policy shifts, and this huge urgent focus on equity.
Right. So for decades, it seemed kind of set in stone, didn't it? But now, the rules are basically being rewritten as we speak.
Exactly. And what we're doing here is digging into all of it. We've got the latest expert reports, the clinical guidelines, which, as you'll see, don't always agree, and some really cutting-edge research. Think AI, liquid biopsies.
It's a lot. So our goal, our mission today is really to help you cut through that noise. Because let's be honest, when you see major groups like the USPSTF, the American Cancer Society, the radiologists all saying slightly different things, it's confusing.
Immensely confusing. So we want to get to the heart of the debate. How do you find as many cancers as possible, save lives, but also minimize the downsides? And those downsides are real. The anxiety, the cost of false alarms, finding cancers that maybe never needed finding.
Diagnosis. Yeah. We need to unpack that. We're looking for those, surprising facts, the things that really show where personalized medicine is heading.
And there are key tensions driving this. That big change, starting screening at age 40 now, the impact of 3D mammography, and this stark, frankly unacceptable fact, Black women dying at a 40% higher rate. That disparity is now forcing change.
Okay, let's start there. Part one. The big shift in the guidelines from the USPSTF, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force. This was just back in April 2024.
A huge deal. It completely replaced their old 2016 guidance. Before, it was kind of wishy-washy for women in their 40s, right? The individual decisions maybe start at 50.
Right, it wasn't a clear recommendation for everyone?
Not at all. Now, it's crystal clear. They recommend biennial screening, so every 2 years for all women starting right at age 40 and continuing up until age 74. No ambiguity there.
And they gave this a B grade. Now, that might sound like, just okay, but in guideline terms, B is pretty significant, isn't it?
It's very significant. A B grade means the task force is saying, with moderate certainty, that this strategy screening every 2 years from 40 to 74 offers a moderate net benefit.
Net benefit, meaning they weighed the good against the bad.
Precisely. They looked at the lives saved versus the potential harms like overdiagnosis, false positives, and concluded the benefits clearly outweigh those harms for this age group, screened biennially. It essentially moves it into the category of recommended standard care.
So why now? What changed to make them overhaul the previous advice? You mentioned epidemiology.
That's the first big reason. The data coming in showed something concerning. Breast cancer rates are actually going up in women in their 40s. About 2% per year.
Wow, 2% annually? That's not insignificant.
Not at all. It's a clear trend. And the older models the USPSTF used back in 2016 didn't fully capture that rising risk. When they plugged this new reality into their latest modeling studies, well, the potential benefit of starting earlier just jumped out.
And what did the models predict in terms of actual lives saved?
The projections were pretty powerful. They estimated that lowering the start age to 40 universally could prevent almost 20% more breast cancer deaths overall compared to the old way of starting routine screening at 50.
Nearly 1/5 more deaths averted. That's a strong case.
A very strong case from a public health perspective.
Okay, and the second reason you mentioned, health equity. This wasn't just a side note in the guidelines, was it? It was front and center.
Absolutely front and center. The task force was explicit. A primary driver for this change was that shocking, persistent 40% higher death rate for Black women.
Despite similar incidence rates.
Or even slightly lower incidence, exactly. Black women are often diagnosed younger. They have a higher rate of aggressive cancers, like triple negative. So that delay in starting screening under the old guidelines was potentially deadly.
So the thinking is lowering the age to 40 acts as a kind of safety net to catch those aggressive cancers earlier in the populations most at risk.
That's exactly the logic. It's a population-level intervention. While we work on better personalized risk tools, this ensures women who might fall through the cracks or face delays get screened sooner. The guideline literally calls it a key first step towards fixing that inequity.
But even with this strong recommendation, the USPSTF admitted there are still big gaps in the evidence. They issued these I statements, right? Insufficient evidence.
Correct. That means areas where they just couldn't make a firm recommendation either way because the research isn't definitive enough yet.
And what were those key areas?
Two main ones. First, screening for women age 75 and older. The balance of benefits and harms gets really complex then with other health issues often becoming more prominent. They said, basically, we need more research.
Okay, older women. What was the second gap? This one seems like it affects a lot of people.
It really does. It's about supplemental screening, meaning adding things like ultrasound or MRI, specifically for women who have dense breasts but are otherwise considered average risk.
Right. Lots of states now mandate telling women they have dense breasts, but the USPSTF is saying we don't have enough proof that extra screening helps them live longer.
Essentially, yes. They acknowledge that density makes mammograms harder to read and is a risk factor itself, but they concluded there isn't enough high-quality evidence yet showing that adding ultrasound or MRI for all women with dense breasts leads to a clear reduction in mortality when weighed against the potential harms like more false positives and biopsies. It's a very contentious I statement.
Okay, so the USPSTF made a big move, but it highlights this ongoing issue, lack of complete agreement. Let's get into that philosophical divide, part two, comparing the major guidelines.
Yeah, this is where it gets really confusing for patients and even doctors. You have the USPSTF, the American Cancer Society, ACS, and then the American College of Radiology, ACR, and Society of Breast Imaging, SBI, and they don't all line up.
Let's start with the ACS, the American Cancer Society. Where do they land compared to the USPSTF's biennial starting at 40?
The ACS is sort of in the middle, offering more flexibility. They say women aged 40 to 44 should have the option to start screening annually. So, not a mandate, but an option.
Okay. And then?
Their core recommendation kicks in from age 45 to 54 annual mammograms during that decade. Then, at age 55, they say women can switch to every 2 years, or they can choose to continue annually. It's more choice-driven.
Interesting. And the ACS also made waves by changing their stance on breast exams, right?
Yeah.
Clinical exams and self-exams.
They did, reflecting how much faith is now placed in imaging. The ACS no longer recommends routine clinical breast exams by a doctor or regular breast self-exams for women at average risk.
Why not? People were told for years to do self-exams.
The evidence, according to the ACS, just isn't there to show they make a difference in mortality when women are getting regular mammograms. Mammography is simply far more effective at finding early cancers, so they dropped the recommendation for average-risk women.
Okay, so that's the ACS option at 40, annual 45-54, flexible after 55. Now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. The ACR and SBI, the radiology groups, they seem to advocate for the most intensive approach.
They absolutely do. Their philosophy is geared towards maximizing the number of lives saved almost at any cost. They recommend annual screening mammography for all average-risk women, starting right at age 40, period.
No option, just do it annually from 40.
Correct. And they go further. The ACR uniquely calls for all women to have a formal risk assessment done by age 25.
25, wow. Why so early?
The goal is to identify women who are actually high risk much earlier in life. Think genetic mutations, strong family history. Those women might need to start screening much earlier, sometimes with MRI, perhaps as young as 30.
And what about the upper age limit? USPSTF stops recommendations at 74 due to lack of evidence. What does the ACR say?
They reject that cutoff. The ACR recommends continuing screening past age 74 annually, as long as the woman is in reasonably good health and doesn't have major comorbidities that would limit her lifespan anyway.
So we have these clear differences. PSTF, biennial 40-74, moderate net benefit focus. CS, flexible, annual emphasis midlife. CRSBI, annual from 40, maximum detection focus, risk assessment early, continue screening later. What's the fundamental conflict here?
It really boils down to how they weigh the harms versus the benefits. The USPSTF takes a very structured population health view. They look at things like QALYs, quality-adjusted life years, and rigorously try to quantify the negative impacts of screening. Overdiagnosis, false positives, anxiety, cost.
So they're balancing the equation, how many lives saved versus how much harm caused by the screening process itself.
Exactly. Their B grade reflects that balanced moderate benefit after accounting for those harms. The ACR and SBI, coming from the perspective of radiologists who see the cancers, prioritize saving every possible life through maximum detection.
They accept that more screening means more false positives and potentially more overdiagnosis, but they see that as a necessary trade-off to achieve the lowest possible mortality rate.
That's the core philosophical difference. All the groups actually agree that annual screening starting at 40 does save the most lives in absolute numbers. The debate is purely about whether the associated harms of that approach are acceptable at a population level. USPSTF says the net benefit is better with biennial. ACR says maximizing lives saved outweighs the harms.
That makes sense. Okay, before we move on, let's circle back to that USPSTF D's grade. You said it has a massive policy implication because of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act. Remind us why that matters so much.
It's huge for access. Because the USPSTF gave screening for women 40-49 that BZ and grade, the ACA mandates that most private insurance plans must cover it in biennial screening, in this case, with no cost sharing. No copay, no deductible for the screening mammogram itself.
So it removes the financial barrier for potentially millions of women in that age group.
Instantly. Before this, coverage was inconsistent. Some plans covered it, some didn't, some had high deductibles. Now it's mandated preventive care. We even saw examples like the World Trade Center Health Program, immediately updating their coverage rules the day the final recommendation came out. It has immediate real-world impact on access.
Got it. Okay, so we understand the guidelines and the debate. Now let's really dig into those harms the USPSTF tries to balance. Part 3. The central conflict, benefits versus harms.
Right. The benefit side is clear. Screening works. Mortality is down almost 40% since widespread screening began in the late 80s, early 90s, but it comes at a cost.
Let's start with the trippiest one, overdiagnosis. Define that again for us.
Overdiagnosis is detecting a cancer, usually through screening, that is so slow-growing or biologically indolent that it would never have caused any symptoms or threatened the person's life if it had just been left alone.
It's a cancer technically, but one that wouldn't have mattered.
Exactly. Often it's things like low-grade ductal carcinoma in situ, or DCIS. The problem is, right now, looking at the cells under a microscope or even on imaging, doctors usually can't definitively tell the harmless ones from the potentially lethal ones.
So if you find it, you treat it.
You almost have to, and that's the harm. Overdiagnosis inevitably leads to overtreatment, unnecessary surgeries, radiation, hormone therapy, all with real risks, side effects, costs, and anxiety for a condition that posed no actual threat.
That's a heavy concept. What are the estimates? How often does this happen? The numbers seem all over the place in different studies.
They do vary a lot based on methodology, but the modeling the USPSTF relied on for their 2024 update provides a good current benchmark. They estimate that about 15% of screen-detected cancers in women 50-74 might be overdiagnosed.
Percent. 1 in 7 cancers found.
Roughly, yes, in that age group screened biennially. If you look at the whole 40-74 biennial screening recommendation, their models projected about 14 cases of overdiagnosis for every 1,000 women screened over their lifetime. It's not rare.
14 women out of 1,000 undergoing potentially major treatment they never needed. Okay, that's overdiagnosis. What about the other major harm, the one that affects way more people directly? False positives.
This is, by far, the most common downside. A false positive is simply when a mammogram looks suspicious, requiring more tests, maybe extra pictures, maybe an ultrasound, maybe even a biopsy, but it turns out not to be cancer after all.
And how common are we talking, especially with more frequent screening like the ACR recommends?
It's incredibly common. If you screen annually for a decade, studies suggest about half of all women will get called back for at least one false alarm during that time.
Half. That's huge.
It is. And it's even more common in younger women, especially those in their 40s, because they tend to have denser breast tissue, which creates more ambiguous findings on the images.
Beyond the obvious hassle, the time off work, the cost, what's the psychological fallout from getting that callback?
It's significant and shouldn't be dismissed. There's the immediate anxiety, obviously. But research shows it lasts. Women report intrusive thoughts about cancer, worry, sleep problems for up to 3 years after being told they're cancer-free.
3 years, even after getting the all clear.
Yes, especially if the workup involved a biopsy. The more invasive the follow-up, the higher and longer lasting the anxiety. It really sticks with people.
And here's the real kicker, the paradox. Experiencing a false positive can actually make women less likely to keep screening, right?
That's the really unfortunate consequence. Studies show women who go through the stress and anxiety of a false positive recall are significantly less likely to come back for their next scheduled mammogram compared to women who always get normal results.
So the harm itself undermines the screening program's effectiveness.
Exactly. And this effect might hit certain groups harder. Some data suggests Asian and Hispanic or Latinx women have the lowest rates of returning to screening after a false positive. So reducing false alarms isn't just about convenience, it's an equity issue too. It helps keep people engaged in the screening process.
Okay. Which brings us naturally to technology. If the main problems are seeing clearly through tissue and avoiding false alarms, better imaging has to be key. Part 4. The new standard 3D mammography or digital breast tomosynthesis, DBT.
Yes, DBT is the game changer here. It's fundamentally different from the old flat 2D mammograms most of us are familiar with.
How does it work? What makes it 3D?
Well, it's technically quasi-3D. Instead of one static picture, the X-ray tube moves in an arc over the compressed breast, taking multiple low-dose images from different angles. Then a computer reconstructs these images into a stack of very thin 1 mm slices.
So the radiologist can scroll through the breast layer by layer.
Precisely, like flipping through the pages of a book.
Yeah.
And that tackles the biggest limitation of 2D mammography head-on, overlapping tissue.
Explain that. How does slicing help with overlap?
In a flat 2D image, dense tissue in front of or behind a small tumor could hide it completely. That's a missed cancer. Or normal layers of tissue could overlap in just the wrong way to look like a suspicious mass that's a false positive. DBT separates those layers, letting the radiologist see through the tissue much more clearly.
Makes sense. So what's the clinical proof? What are the key metrics showing DBT is better?
2 main things consistently stand out in studies. First, it finds more cancers. The cancer detection rate, or CDR, is higher with DBT, typically finding 1 to 2 additional invasive cancers per 1,000 women screened compared to 2D alone.
And crucially, invasive cancers, the ones most likely to be dangerous.
Yes, that's a key point. It's particularly better at finding those smaller invasive cancers. Second, and directly addressing the harm we just discussed, DBT significantly reduces the recall rate for false alarms.
How much does it cut down on those stressful callbacks?
The relative reduction is usually reported between 15% and 30%. Because the radiologist can scroll through the slices and clarify things that looked fuzzy on 2D, they can dismiss many potential false alarms without needing to call the patient back. That's a huge win for reducing anxiety and unnecessary costs.
And given its ability to see through tissue, it must be particularly helpful for women with dense breasts, right?
Absolutely transformative for them. Dense tissue is notoriously difficult for 2D mammography. Sensitivity can be really low. DBT cuts through that density much more effectively, significantly boosting cancer detection in the very group that needs it most.
So DBT finds more invasive cancers, reduces false alarms, and is especially good for dense breasts. It sounds like the undisputed standard of care. Everyone should be getting it, ideally.
Now, that is the clinical consensus, yes. It is the standard of
Yet,
care.
suppose a catch, an equity issue again.
Unfortunately, yes, access is uneven. Despite being the standard, the rollout of DBT technology hasn't reached everywhere equally. Recent data suggests significantly less than half of all accredited mammography facilities in the U.S. actually have 3D capability.
Less than half. So many women are still getting the older 2D technology.
That's right. Especially you tend to see disparities in rural areas or lower resource communities. If DBT finds 1 to 2 more cancers per 1,000 women and you only have access to 2D, you are, by definition, receiving a lower standard of care. This technology gap is a direct contributor to health inequities.
That's a critical point. Okay, so DBT is the standard, but even it might not be enough for everyone. Part 5, supplemental screening and what's next in imaging.
Right. For women identified as high risk, or sometimes for those with extremely dense breasts, even at average risk, we need more.
Let's start with the highest risk group. What's the go-to supplemental tool for them?
For women with a calculated lifetime risk over 20-25%, maybe a known BRCA gene mutation, or a history of chest radiation, the undisputed tool is breast MRI.
Magnetic resonance imaging, how is that used?
The protocol for these high-risk women is typically annual screening using both mammography, usually DBT now, and breast MRI, often starting at a younger age, like 30.
But we keep hearing MRI isn't for average risk women. Why not if it's so sensitive?
2 big reasons: cost and false positives. MRI is very expensive, and while it's incredibly sensitive and finds almost everything, it also finds a lot of benign things that look suspicious. This leads to a very high rate of follow-up biopsies for findings that turn out to be nothing, which isn't considered an acceptable trade-off for the general population.
Okay, so MRI is for high risk. What about ultrasound? It seems common for dense breasts, but you mentioned the USPSTF gave it that uncertain eye statement.
Ultrasound is definitely used widely as a supplement, especially for dense breasts. It's good at finding cancers hidden from mammograms. It's accessible, no radiation.
Sounds good. What's the hesitation?
Again, it's the false positive problem. Ultrasound also tends to find many benign lumps and cysts, leading to a lot of unnecessary biopsies and anxiety. And crucially, the USPSTF looked hard and couldn't find strong enough evidence that adding ultrasound screening for all average-risk women with dense breasts definitively reduces their chances of dying from breast cancer once you factor in those harms. More research is needed there.
So if MRI is too much for most and ultrasound's benefit is debatable, what else is emerging? Contrast-enhanced mammography, CEM.
CEM is really interesting. It's kind of a hybrid approach. You get an IV injection of a standard contrast agent, the same stuff used in CT scans. Tumors tend to have more blood vessels, so they light up brightly on the mammogram taken shortly after the injection.
So it adds functional information blood flow to the structural mammogram image.
Exactly. It helps highlight suspicious areas. It's being positioned as potentially a more accessible, lower-cost alternative to MRI for finding those hidden cancers, especially in dense breasts.
Is there data showing it works?
Early data is promising. For example, the Seaman trial showed that adding CEM to DBT found significantly more cancers, about 10 extra cancers per 1,000 women screened. That's a substantial increase.
Wow. But is there a downside?
Yes, the familiar trade-off. Like other highly sensitive tests, CEM also increased the false positive rate compared to just DBT alone. It finds more, but some of what it finds isn't cancer.
And briefly, what about molecular breast imaging, MBI?
MBI uses a different approach. A small radioactive tracer is injected, and it gets taken up by metabolically active cells like cancer cells.
Yeah.
It's very effective, especially in dense breasts, but it involves a radiation dose, requires specialized cameras, and isn't widely available, so its use is more limited currently.
Okay, this leads perfectly into the ultimate goal, moving beyond these general recommendations to truly personalized screening. Part 6, the frontier risk stratification.
This is the paradigm shift everyone is working towards. Instead of one-size-fits-all based mainly on age, we tailor the screening plan, what test, how often, when to start based on your individual risk profile.
What goes into building that profile? What are the key factors?
We've touched on some already. First, breast density. It's a major player. Not only does it make mammograms harder to read, but having dense breasts itself increases your underlying risk of developing cancer, maybe 4 to 6 times higher for the densest category compared to the least dense.
And new FDA rules mean women have to be told their density status now, right?
Yes, that notification is rolling out nationwide, which is crucial for awareness. Second key factor, genetics. Specific gene mutations like BRCA1 and BRCA2 confer very high risk, demanding intensive screening, often with MRI, starting much younger.
Okay, density, major genes. What else? You mentioned polygenic risk scores, PRS, earlier. Tell us more about those.
PRS is fascinating. Most breast cancer isn't caused by those rare high-impact genes like BRCA. It's influenced by hundreds of common genetic variations, SNPs, each having a tiny effect on risk. A PRS score adds up all those tiny effects across your genome.
So it can refine risk estimates even for women without a BRCA mutation or strong family history.
Exactly. It helps differentiate risk within that large, average risk pool. Someone with no family history might still have a high PRS score, putting them at significantly elevated risk, needing more screening. Conversely, someone might have a low PRS score. It adds another layer of personalization.
Makes sense. And the fourth factor?
Clinical history. This includes a personal history of breast cancer, obviously, but also having certain high-risk benign findings on a previous biopsy, like LCIS, lobular carcinoma in situ, or ADH, atypical ductal hyperplasia. These aren't cancer, but they significantly increase future risk and warrant closer surveillance.
So you gather all this info density, family history, genetics, including PRS, prior biopsies. How does a clinician put it all together to decide, okay, you need annual MRI versus biennial DBT is fine for you?
They use sophisticated statistical risk assessment models. You might hear names like the Gale model, Tyrer-Cuzick, or the BCSC risk calculator. These are validated tools that take multiple inputs and generate a quantitative score, usually your estimated lifetime risk or 5-year risk of breast cancer.
And that number drives the decision.
It guides the decision, yes. For example, many guidelines use a lifetime risk threshold of 20%. If the model predicts your risk is above 20%, you're generally considered high risk, and the recommendation shifts often to include annual MRI alongside mammography, potentially starting earlier. Below that, you might follow average risk pathways, perhaps adjusted by density or PRS.
And this whole personalized approach isn't just theoretical. There are huge trials testing it right now.
Absolute critical trials.
Yeah.
In the US, the big one is the Wisdom study. It's directly comparing standard annual screening to a personalized approach, where screening frequency and modality are tailored based on a comprehensive risk score using genetics, PRS, density, and other factors.
And there's a similar large trial in Europe?
Yes, the MyPBS study. These trials are vital. The results will provide the high-level evidence needed to potentially shift national guidelines across the board towards risk-based screening in the future.
It sounds incredibly promising, but also complex to implement everywhere. What are the hurdles?
Huge hurdles. 2 big ones stand out. First, the data integration challenge. Think about pulling together genetic data from one lab, density data from the mammogram report, family history from the patient interview, maybe a PRS score from another source, into one reliable risk score available to the doctor instantly. That requires serious IT infrastructure that many health systems just don't have yet.
Yeah, getting all those systems to talk to each other seamlessly sounds tough.
It is. The second challenge is psychosocial. How do you communicate these personalized risk scores effectively? Telling someone they're high risk can cause immense anxiety.
Or telling someone they're low risk might give them a false sense of security and they might skip screening later.
Exactly. Managing those reactions, providing adequate counseling, especially genetic counseling, ensuring people understand what the score means, and follow the tailored plan. It's a massive communication and support challenge that needs to be solved alongside the technology.
A complex future, but a potentially much smarter one. Let's pivot back, though, because while we build that future, we have to address the crisis now. Part 7, the disparity crisis in equity.
Yes, we absolutely have to keep coming back to this. That 40% higher mortality rate for Black women compared to white women, despite similar incidences. It's the system's biggest failure.
And the new age 40 guideline is partly a response, but the roots of the problem go much deeper, don't they?
Much deeper. It's not just about finding cancer, it's about everything that happens after. The data strongly suggest Black women face delays all along the pathway: longer time to diagnosis after an abnormal screen, less access to high-quality treatment, lower rates of receiving guideline-recommended care.
What are the interconnected factors driving this?
You can group them. First, social determinants of health. Things like poverty, lack of stable housing or transportation, inconsistent insurance. These create huge barriers to even getting screened, let alone following it promptly.
Then there are failures within the healthcare system itself.
Definitely. Access and quality failures. We already mentioned the technology gap. Black women are more likely to be screened at facilities without 3D mammography. They also face longer waits for diagnostic tests, are less likely to be offered genetic counseling or advanced treatments. The system itself provides unequal care.
And are there biological factors at play too?
Yes, that's the third piece. Black women have a higher incidence of more aggressive subtypes, particularly triple-negative breast cancer, which is harder to treat, and they are often diagnosed at younger ages. These biological factors make timely diagnosis and state-of-the-art treatment even more critical.
So the USPSTF guideline, starting at 40, is a broad attempt to catch those younger aggressive cancers earlier, especially in vulnerable populations.
It acts as a crucial safety net, yes. While we develop better personalized systems, it ensures more women enter the screening pipeline earlier. But it's not enough on its own. We need targeted solutions.
What actually works? What evidence-based interventions can start closing this gap now?
One of the most effective tools we have is patient navigation. These are dedicated programs, often with trained community health workers, who personally guide patients through the maze.
How does that help specifically?
They help with everything: scheduling appointments, arranging transport, reminding patients, helping them understand results, connecting them with financial aid, even to overcoming language barriers. Navigation is proven to significantly improve follow-up rates after abnormal screens, which is a major point where disparities occur.
Makes sense. What else? Building trust seems key, given historical inequities.
Absolutely. Culturally tailored outreach is vital. Generic pamphlets aren't enough. Messaging needs to be sensitive to cultural context, delivered in the right language, often through trusted community partners like churches or local groups. And fundamentally, policies like Medicaid expansion and robust reminder systems within health systems are critical to lower those basic financial and logistical hurdles.
Okay, so navigation, culturally appropriate outreach, and supportive policies. Now let's look even further ahead. Part 8, the technological horizon, AI, and liquid biopsy.
This is where things get really futuristic. But the impact is starting now. Artificial intelligence, AI, is making big inroads in reading mammograms.
How is AI being used? Is it replacing radiologists?
Not replacing, more like augmenting. Right now, AI primarily acts as a tireless, highly trained second reader. Deep learning algorithms are trained on millions of mammograms to spot subtle patterns, sometimes even things the human eye might miss that could indicate an early cancer.
So it helps catch more cancers. What does the data show?
Some large studies are showing impressive results. One found that using AI support led to detecting about 17–18% more cancers compared to the standard approach of having two radiologists read the scan. It seems particularly good at finding those tricky interval cancers that pop up between screenings.
That's significant. Does it help with the radiologist's workload too? Burnout is a real issue.
Huge potential there. Especially in systems that require double reading, AI can potentially take a first pass. It can confidently identify a large percentage of scans as clearly normal, flagging only these suspicious or complex ones for the human expert.
So radiologists can focus their time on the tougher cases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It improves efficiency and lets them focus their skills where they're needed most. And there's another exciting AI application emerging, using the mammogram itself to predict future risk.
How does that work? Looking at tissue patterns.
Yes. AI algorithms are learning to analyze the texture and density patterns in the breast tissue on a mammogram in ways humans can't. These subtle patterns, it turns out, can be predictive of a woman's long-term risk of developing cancer, so that mammogram becomes not just a snapshot of today, but a window into future risk.
Wow, okay, that's AI and imaging. What about the other huge area, liquid biopsy, detecting cancer from a blood test?
Right. This involves looking for tiny bits of tumor material, mainly circulating tumor DNA, ctDNA, that cancers shed into the bloodstream. It's a way to find molecular evidence of cancer without needing imaging or a tissue biopsy initially.
Is this being used clinically now?
Yes, very effectively, but mostly for monitoring patients after a cancer diagnosis, especially to detect recurrence.
How does that work?
Ultrasensitive liquid biopsy tests can pick up ctDNA signals, indicating that cancer might be returning months or even years before it would become visible on a CT scan or MRI. There are studies showing detection up to 41 months earlier.
41 months, that's an incredible lead time.
It's revolutionary. It opens a huge window to intervene earlier. For instance, the Serena-6 trial used liquid biopsy to detect a specific mutation, ESR1, that signals resistance to standard therapy. Finding that mutation allowed doctors to switch treatments much sooner, improving outcomes.
Okay, so it's powerful for monitoring recurrence, but what about using it for initial screening in healthy people, finding that first cancer?
That's the holy grail, but it's much harder. The challenge is twofold: sensitivity and specificity at scale. For screening millions of healthy people, a test needs near-perfect specificity, maybe 99.9% or higher, to avoid overwhelming the system with false positives.
Because even a tiny false positive rate multiplied by millions means thousands of people getting unnecessary workups and anxiety.
Exactly. And sensitivity is also a challenge. Very early, stage I tumors shed tiny amounts of ctDNA, maybe not enough for current tests to reliably detect. So right now, for primary screening, the tech isn't quite there yet in terms of accuracy and avoiding false alarms.
This raises a profound future question, though. What happens when the molecular evidence from a liquid biopsy conflicts with the imaging?
That's the huge clinical and ethical dilemma looming. Imagine a highly reliable liquid biopsy comes back, positive, clear molecular signal of cancer. But the mammogram, ultrasound, even MRI, all come back clean. No visible tumor.
What do you do? Does the patient have cancer or not?
Where is it? How do you treat it? We're moving from an era of finding anatomical lumps to finding molecular traces. It requires entirely new diagnostic pathways, new ways of counseling patients, new definitions, perhaps, of what it means to have cancer. We are just starting to grapple with these questions.
A really mind-bending shift. Okay, let's try to synthesize all of this. Wrapping up.
It's clear the old way is fading. Static, age-based screening is giving way to something much more dynamic, risk-adapted, intelligent.
The new baseline seems to be the USPSTF age 40 start, biennial screening, using 3D mammography as the standard tool. That's the foundation now.
Yes, that's the floor. But the trajectory is clearly towards personalization based on individual risk, and achieving true equity in access and outcomes has to be paramount.
So for the health systems, the policymakers listening, what's the call to action?
Invest. Invest in getting 3D mammography everywhere to close that tech gap. Fund patient navigation programs they work, and pour research into those evidence gaps the USPSTF highlighted, screening women over 75, and clarifying the role of supplemental screening for dense breasts. We need answers there.
And for the individual listener trying to make sense of it all, we started by saying the guidelines conflict. What's the final takeaway for someone navigating this personally?
It's that you have to be an active participant now. With the USPSTF, ACS, and ACR all offering different advice on timing and frequency, you can't just passively accept one recommendation. You really need to engage in shared decision-making with your doctor.
Which means understanding the nuances we've discussed today, the real benefits of finding cancer early versus the real harms of false positives and overdiagnosis is no longer optional knowledge. It's essential for making an informed choice that's right for you.
Absolutely. And looking ahead, ponder that final question. As we get better at finding molecular traces of disease long before we can see it anatomically, how will that change our relationship with diagnosis, with risk, and with the very definition of being healthy or sick? That's the deep water we're heading into.
A profound thought indeed. The science is moving incredibly fast, and staying informed is key. Thank you for guiding us through this complex landscape today.
My pleasure. It's a critical conversation.
And thank you all for joining us on the deep dive. We'll talk to you next time.